Welcome to Between the Reads, where we shine a spotlight on some of the most talented Black authors in the industry to discuss their works of fiction and the inspirations behind them. Each episode will dive into the rich and diverse world of literature, exploring everything from historical fiction to romance and speculative fiction to YA and beyond. Tune in as we celebrate the voices of Black authors and the power of storytelling. Are you ready, Boos and Bros? Then sit back, relax, and let's get to it. Jim Wilbourne is a creative at heart. If he's not writing a novel, he's writing and recording a song, or once again trying to learn how to draw. When he's not working on the next project, he spends his free time working on another project. He totally has a life. Jim lives in the Deep South with his wife and son and doesn't miss the snow at all. And I love short intros. Jim, welcome to Between the Reads.
Thank you.
I'm glad you could be here with us today. So tell us what your book, The Seventh Cadence, is all about.
Well, The Seventh Cadence is kind of a book about, I kind of think of it as a post-apocalyptic fantasy story where, the powers that control the world suddenly disappear, because of foreign attack. And, the young heroes kind of have to rebuild everything from scratch because they don't have, much guidance. Most of the elders are gone now. So it's about that. It's basically a fugitive scientist and a powerful pacifist and a prince who kind of doesn't really want the throne, kind of all having their own adventures and, trying to thwart the Desert Dominion, who is kind of embarking on this holy war to take over the rest of the world because they feel that that is the best way to get the true wizard to return. So.
Now, what inspired this story?
So much. So, like a lot of writers, I started writing when I was a lot younger. And this story, the seeds of this story started when I was about 16 or 17. And I started writing some of it. And I did not finish it at all. And one day I came back to it and I was looking at it and I'm like, this is really interesting, but it's awful. Like the prose are god awful. I basically stripped it down to its barest elements and reconstructed it.
Okay.
And, in the reconstruction, I thought of, the different tropes I wanted to subvert, the different spin I wanted to take on things. And, thinking about a lot about history and war and conflicts and the reasons behind them. And I kind of wanted to introduce those pieces. And so the Crusades were a big inspiration. I read a lot about the Crusades. General conflicts around the world. And also, I really like the idea of blending magic and science fiction together. Now, I would say that for anybody reading the book, they wouldn't say it's science fantasy or has science fiction elements strongly tied in. But to me, that's what I'm writing because I do like a lot of sci-fi as well. So, shows like Star Trek really inspired me because I really love their approach to solving problems using science.
Right.
Quote unquote science. I kind of use those concepts in the plot and taking real life science and blending it with magic so that, they can solve their problems.
Okay. Now we have, pronounce the name for me, T-E-L-E. Is it Teal? Is it Tella?
Okay, so my standpoint on name pronunciations is that however you want to pronounce it, I don't care. Whatever makes it happy for you. I personally pronounce her name Telly.
Telly, okay. So we have Telly, who is a keeper of knowledge. We have, is it Navid? Like Navid. David, but with it. Navid, okay. Navid, who's a seer, who's trying to fight his curse. And we have Gabriel, the heir to the throne of his kingdom, who wants to stand as a warrior instead.
Right.
Tell us about your creative process in developing these characters.
Right. So Telly she wasn't the first character that came to me, but when I started the rewrite process of what I created from when I was younger, she was the one that kind of really stood out to me as the character that I really wanted to write most about. You know, the whole idea of having this woman who was incredibly intelligent in driving the story in incredibly forceful ways. You know, she's not a perfect character. She exhibits a lot of social ineptitudes at times because of her isolation from the rest of the world. But, you know, she's an absolute force and she's willing to learn. And I really love the idea of what happened a lot during the Dark Ages of knowledge being suppressed, and you know, scientific progress kind of coming to a standstill. And I took that and thought, well, I mean, what if this person is basically a scientist who's a fugitive, and that kind of pairing together, why is she a fugitive? Well, because she knows things, and how is that dangerous? And that's kind of how I start piecing together her life, and that is the big inspiration for her. Navid was one of the first characters from the original story, and he's very different now. But he had some of the same abilities, and I thought about how I would want seers to work in my world, and I really love the idea of making a distinction between seers and prophets. And this is one of those things that I kind of had to tune a lot in the story, and even I think even sometimes people still get confused about the differences between the two, but I love the idea of prophets kind of having like this more broader forecasting ability about the world.
Right.
Seers having this more...
It's more granular with the seers.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So that they can kind of... And it's more about them, you know, and and how they interact with the world. And I love that. And because of that ability, you know, it being so granular that they can kind of see, or not really see, but intuit what's going to happen to them.
Right.
Very close in the future, that makes them an incredible weapon. So, and that's kind of drawing on a little bit of, Mistborn in Star Wars with ATM and being able to see into the future, and Star Wars with, Jedi being able to, basically intuit kind of what's going to happen. So
right, what's going to happen, yeah.
And so I kind of blended that together a little bit. But also I started to think about, well, what if there were people like that? What would happen? I mean, they would be incredibly dangerous. So I thought, okay, well, maybe at some point everybody got together and was like, these people are way too dangerous to have around. We have to, we don't want to kill them. I mean, that wouldn't be humane, but maybe we can just put them away somewhere. And that's kind of what happened with Navid. He, when a seer manifests his abilities, it's kind of like a reverse Jedi temple. You get sent away, but instead of them developing your abilities, they teach you to suppress them. And,
I thought that was so interesting.
Right. So again, finding ways to subvert tropes in interesting ways. And I kind of in my head compare them to, if one country has seers, then that's basically the equivalent of one country having nukes and this country doesn't have nukes, so everybody's got to turn in their nukes. Right. So, and if you're caught with a seer, you're in big trouble. So that is kind of how I came to his character, and the idea that he's very powerful, but also a passionate pacifist because of his upbringing inside the temple. I thought that's an interesting, contrast. Yeah. And what conflicts with that, what conflicts would arise because of these two things that don't always fit together. Right. What kind of character journey could he go through? Gabriel is fun because to reduce it to its kind of most interesting part to me is that he's kind of my Mulan character in a way. Like
Okay.
the story of Mulan from Disney is kind of like, well, this is a person who does not, he's not, he doesn't like his lot in life. He doesn't like how
Right.
things have gone. I mean, for most people, being a prince and being heir to the throne would be great, but he's like, no, I really just want to be a warrior.
Right.
I would even take blacksmith over king. Like, I've seen how this whole thing plays out. I don't like politics.
It's like,
I
this
don't
ain't
like-
it. I don't want it.
Right. This is not what I want to do, but that's what he has to do.
Right.
And, he's seen how his father has gone from basically a very powerful warrior and figure for his tribe. And then, because all the tribes were united against, the Desert Dominion in the past, that consolidation of power kind of did something where it kind of made it more of like, this is more of a desk job now. This is governing rather than
Right.
being more of a more, on the front lines type of leader. And,
Right.
He saw his father, being chained to the throne by this governing power. And
Right.
he's like, well, I'm a great fighter. Like, this is what I should be doing. And he goes and tries to accomplish that in spite of what he thinks what his duties actually are. So,
Yeah. So now the reader, we get to see, say her name again. Telly?
Telly?
Telly. Okay. I'm going to get it like Telly. Okay. The reader gets to see Telly experience much of the world for the first time as we read and watch her. And it allows us to explore the world that you created in this book right alongside her. What were the challenges of writing from her perspective? Because she was very naive and, was very sheltered. So explain the challenges of writing her, because you have all these other characters who are more worldly, and then you have her and she's so innocent. So what were the challenges writing her?
Right. I went through a lot of evolutions of writing her, and I tried to take her down paths that I wanted her to go in, and she just would not do them. I don't know if you've ever had a writer tell you this, but the characters just start rebelling.
The characters don't want to do what they want them to do.
Right.
Yes.
So I tried to take her down a couple different paths, and she just wouldn't do it. Like, I tried to, you're sitting there at the keyboard trying to get her to do the thing you wanted to do, and it's
Right.
like, why is this not coming out right? This is all wrong. And it almost feels like the character's kind of like looking over their shoulder at you, like, come on, like, this
Right.
isn't where I'm
Like,
supposed
this
to be
is
going.
not me.
So, with her, it became me really thinking about, who is this character? Like, what kind of personality does she have? And I came kind of to the conclusion that she was so sheltered, and she kind of had a very specific way of living that she sees everything through that lens. So, since her whole life has been centered around being a keeper of this knowledge, she even starts to view, building a relationship with Navid, her friendship with him, as an experiment,
Right.
because that's what keepers do, So as she navigates through her world, she's thinking of things as a keeper, and she deals with grief as a keeper, when, from the death of those close to her, she kind of automatically goes to, oh, well, I have to document this. And
Right.
in order to allow herself to process it, or maybe even avoid processing it. And she also becomes pretty single-mindedly focused on the goals that, the mandate that her parents have given her, almost to the point of, abandoning the people or the people around her that she feels are a hindrance to what she needs to accomplish. So that was kind of fun to do. And it was also a little tricky to do because I didn't want the reader to hate her. I just
Right.
needed them to understand what she was going through and who she was and who she was turning into. And that was a little bit tricky to balance, especially in revision. I had to soften in certain ways and, make her a little sharper in other ways. So.
Well, speaking of that relationship between Telly and Navid, how did their contrasting backgrounds influence each other throughout the story? Because you have Telly, and she does kind of work your nerves a little bit because she's kind of feisty and she's kind of rude, but when you understand her backstory and everything that happened to her family, you understand it. But I was still like, she's still kind of feisty and rude, unnecessarily. She doesn't need to be that way.
Right.
So talk about their relationship and how they influence each other throughout the story.
Right. Yeah, so the funny thing about Telly and Navid is they both have a lot of similarities. They both kind of had a childhood away from normalcy. Telly had her parents, but she was separated from the rest of society. Navid lost his parents and separated from the rest of society, but kind of had a larger group of people around him that were very much like him. And in a lot of ways, their upbringing is similar, different settings, but they also had different values instilled in them, where Telly was raised to protect this knowledge and even taught, to defend herself because, at any time, the Desert Dominion could find them and, take away everything, and preserving that knowledge until they could reunite it with the wizard, the one true wizard, was important to them. So that was kind of what she learned under. Whereas Navid, it was a little bit of the opposite, where it was like, well, you have a lot of power and it's bad for the world, and you kind of have to reel that in and suppress it as much as possible. So when they got together, Telly helped Navid see a little bit more of how maybe not black and white his world is. And Navid helped Telly see that, you can't, that single-mindedness, towards getting to her goal, isn't necessarily always the best way. You leave a lot behind when you do that. That's not necessarily healthy or beneficial to the world at large sometimes. So.
So while we're talking about characters, you alternate between perspectives of different characters like Gabriel and Telly and Navid and is it Amy?
Amy, yes.
Amy and Mara and General Darius. So how did you decide on these specific characters to portray the different worldviews in your book?
Right. So here's kind of, I wrote a lot of the book with the theme of exploring violence, and also, and I didn't want to. Generally, it's a good idea when you're kind of creating a theme for a story is to know exactly what you want the lesson of your story to be. But in my case, I kind of wanted to do something different. I kind of wanted to present the theme and then show how maybe it's not always one answer. Maybe there's different ways to get to a certain end, and sometimes the way to do it is violence, and sometimes it isn't. And, getting to that end, each character has that journey wrapped around violence. So with Gabriel, his journey kind of is, him aggressively attempting to do something using violence, and then, figuring out like maybe at the end, maybe that's not the path, with another character, it's, I'm sticking to my guns. Violence is not the answer. And then they stick to their guns completely and it works. It's kind of that morality arc where they kind of stick to what they believe in and win in the end for it. With another character, it's, maybe I can be more aggressive and sticking to that actually works. And then another character is, I shouldn't be aggressive, and then, you know what, I'm going to have to change and give in a little bit and be more aggressive in order for that to get to the end. And I kind of wanted to explore all of these avenues, and I used each of those characters to explore that, the theme of violence and where it
And
fits.
how everyone responds to it. Yeah.
Right. Right. Amy, is just my favorite character.
Why?
I don't know. There's just something about writing her that's fun for me. Just because her outlook on the world, it's just, I don't know. It's just fun to write. I can't really explain it to you, but like that late teenage, like ambition mixed with like a little bit of naivete. Well, you know, just that perfect mix, and like having that sister relationship too with her and Mara, and them not exactly getting along. You know, they love each other, but they don't, you know, they're growing into adulthood, and they're kind of they're having to reckon with the idea that they're both becoming adult women who have their own viewpoints, and, you know, and Mara having to be, you know, the mother to Amy for so many years, while only being, you know, a couple years older than her. You know, she's coming to realize, like, oh, like, she doesn't need me in that way anymore. And she has a hard time seeing her that way. And Amy, you know, having that pseudo sister / mother complex with her, you know, is trying to break away from that and do her own thing. I don't know. I just find that very fun to write. So when she first got introduced to the story, there was a little bit of an exploratory element to it where I didn't realize Amy's role in the theme was going to be Amy's role in the theme. Telly ran into her, and I loved her so much. I'm like, she has to be in the book more. Like, I just like writing about her, and I'm like, what is her interesting perspective here? Like, maybe there's something more. And I explored that, and that's how she became more of a larger character in the story. And I have a sequel novella called Strangers in the Promised Land that actually is more of like an extended epilogue for the book that follows Amy and Mara and does an extra adventure with them. Because I love writing Amy so much, you also get to see viewpoints from Mara as well, actually seeing it from her perspective. And in a way, it's kind of a story that should have been in the main book, but pacing-wise, it wouldn't have made sense. So, you know, I'm like, I still want to tell this story, so I told the story anyway. So...
Well, you have it's just funny, you know, when authors talk about how a character kind of just shows up when they're writing, and it's not somebody they intended on being in the story, but they like them so much, they're just like, I have to find a way for this person to stay.
Right.
So, yeah. So, your world building is extensive, it's very vivid, but yet you kind of embedded it very subtly into the story. It's not these huge expository dumps. You kind of experience it as you read the book. And as we read the book, you see different dominions, you see cultures, and even a unique take on dragons. Tell us about your world building process for this book. How did you build this world?
Like many great stories, it begins with a map.
Okay. Yes, the map in the front of the book. Okay.
Right. Other than the main conflict between Zora and the Desert Dominion, which started a little bit before the map, building the map was kind of critical because once I saw the map and understood where everyone was, pieces of the world started to fall into place. You know, like I knew I wanted, you know, the African subcultures, based on that. You know, I knew I wanted, this area would be, you know, the area that's more Asian inspired. This would be, the more pseudo-European inspired areas. Zora is kind of, in a way, more of an American, a United States of America kind of inspired place, whereas Armith is more pseudo-European.
Okay.
So I thought, well, what would be the conflicts? Like, let's look at the map. There's mountains here. This is desert here, and then I have this here. Like, that probably isn't working out well for them, and what's going on over here? And I start thinking about all the conflicts that might brew because of this. And another big element that I built in with the world building was obviously, the magic system. And those two things combined kind of made the world fall together. So with the whole magic system of there being only one wizard, like there's no other magic users technically in this world. No one can use magic except for this one person. And he's been gone for 200 years. And the fact that there are spells that he left behind that can be triggered by people who cannot use magic kind of created something more interesting. And of course, the system with the keepers, where I introduced the element that magic can't really be done. Magic has a system, in that your ability to use it is directly influenced by how well you understand the natural world around you. So for one wizard, no matter how much time he has to be able to investigate and understand the world completely, it's too much of a task. So having a system of keepers who are essentially scientists to help him understand the world so that he can construct spells in a way, kind of like there are scientists and there are engineers, and, these things there's different jobs for different things. So I knew I wanted the wizard there to only be one wizard, to limit the magic system. And I also knew that I kind of wanted him to disappear, because what happens when that happens? Like, how does the world react to that?
Right.
So one aspect of that I thought was, well, what if one culture thought, well, this is the worst thing ever, that he disappeared, and you know what? He's the only wizard, so clearly, there's some divinity there.
Right.
So, and the only reason he left is because maybe not everyone treated him like the way he deserved to be treated. And that, in the doctrine of having, like, well, the only way to get him to come back is to force everyone to acknowledge him as that.
Right.
Then maybe he'll come back, that really drives the antagonistic force. They are on a holy war, to bring what they view as good back into the world. And they don't really care what it takes to get there, but they have to get there because that's the greater good for them.
Right.
I really loved exploring that. The fact that I try not to do big info dumps is kind of more about me wanting to allow you to connect with the characters more before I tell you more about the world. Because for me, I kind of, if I don't care about the characters, I don't really care how cool your world is.
Right.
And maybe that's a sin as a fantasy fan. Like, obviously fantasy fans love their worlds, and if the world is kind of weak, then it's hard to build cool stories out of it. But I kind of wanted to ease you into it and kind of, just let it lay there in the background and let the reader kind of make certain assumptions and just weave it in as slowly as I possibly could.
Right. So talking about the magic, in your book, people would be put to death if they used magic. So let's talk about that. I understand that you have this wizard and how you created it, but why have such a severe punishment for using magic?
Right. So in the book, Telly kind of expresses within her own mind, that kind of what's happening is an exercise in overcorrection. So we have the Desert Dominion, who's on this holy war to bring magic back. To them, magic is good. And they're willing to subjugate everyone in order to have it. But the people that they originally oppressed, the people in the tribes within Zora, they experienced magic as something completely different. They see it as their oppressive force, you know.
Right.
That's the tool of their oppressors. So they're like, no. Not only is the Dominion not going to take over our lands, you know, none of this magic stuff, because that's clearly connected with them. So they've associated, you know, all the goods of magic with the evils of people who use it, you know, improperly. So they just don't want it at all. Prophets and seers aren't the same as magics, but even they, you know, kind of get a hard time because they clearly sit with outside of the natural
they're
people,
in that, you know? They're like magic adjacent.
Right. So I mean, that's kind of why the punishment is so harsh, because they see it as, oh, are they you know, part of this whole thing that we don't like, you know. So it's not great. It's not great. Neither side is addressing it well. But
yeah, and that's the kind of that's what I think I enjoyed about this book, is that it helps you to think and understand that though you may not agree with how someone does something, everybody has their reasons for doing things, and everyone has their reasons for their worldviews and for why they operate the way that they operate. And as you said, you know, Telly kind of helps you to see that everything isn't black and white. And as you're reading this book, you know, I could never find myself siding with any one person. Like, I would get angry with everybody in the book at some point or other, but they all also had some redeeming qualities about them. So it's kind of a thought experiment in trying to empathize with other people, even if you don't necessarily agree with what they're doing.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of it, like I said, I drew a lot of history into this. I mean, you can easily see this if you kind of step back in our geopolitical landscape in the real world and kind of look at it in a longer time scale of what actually led to the state that we're in. It's easy to take a stand on something for today, but if you look at, well, how did it get here? You know, you can see how people view things in a different way, without taking any specific political stands here. But like, you know, the conflict that China and the U.S. has is very long and very interesting when you really start breaking down, like, why don't we trust each other? Like, what went wrong? And you can see, you know, the violations on both sides. Like, why, you know, one side is like, well, you did this and that, I don't like that. And they're like, well, you did this, and who says you're the boss? You know, and that whole relationship, you know, you can look at, there's just so many parallels, like North Korea, like what happened with them, you know, why they're so distrustful of the rest of the world. If you look at it from their side and try to see the humanity in it, it's like, oh, wow, I guess in a way I kind of get why they are the way they are. I don't agree with it, but I understand what they're doing and why they had this strange overcorrection, you know, for a problem that they had. So, you know, that whole duality of what the fact that, you know, everyone is kind of the hero of their own story really resonates with me, even if I don't agree with them. You know, I kind of want to show, I don't like creating strawmen, you know, in my arguments and my stories, and I like exploring all the facets of it.
So I want to talk about Gabriel a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm convinced that when people read this book, you're going to have people that either love him or hate him.
Mm-hmm.
He's a very polarizing character.
Mm-hmm.
And he decides to run from his responsibilities as king because he wants to become a warrior. He wants to help his people. He wants to walk the walk.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to be down in the trenches.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you have him make that choice? I mean, without giving anything away in the story.
Well, I guess every character in a way is a little piece of me in certain ways. And I really remember angsty me. That whole, like none of this makes sense. Like, I don't even want to be a part of this kind of version of myself in my teenage years in early 20s. And, kind of wanting to, just forge my own path in a way, which I feel like that's a very relatable thing for people.
Absolutely.
And honestly, I wanted him to start off as kind of a insufferable character, like, because the reader is familiar with this kind of character, the prince who doesn't like his lot in life. I kind of played into that, and it's like, I'm playing it straight. It's just gonna be that character. And then, his decision to leave was kind of my smaller surprise of, no, this isn't going to stay in this setting. I'm gonna move him somewhere else. Now, what happens when someone who feels the way he feels, who has the talents that he has, is placed among the people that he wished to be placed among? Like, what would actually happen? Unfortunately, I did not have the page count to explore it as much as I really wanted to explore it, but
I mean, it was already 696 pages.
I know. Jim. Listen, I'm telling you, editing down his story to the essentials was challenging. It's like, how do I write this scene so I accomplish these 5 things at once? Because I cannot expand the story anymore. So I kind of wanted him to be amongst his people and see how they view the battle versus how he views it, and for him to have a character arc based off of that. And then at the same time, him kind of realizing who his father was and why his role might have been important. And what does that mean for him in the end? So I used his cousin as a foil in that, so that he could see, the what might happen if things don't go well. So yeah, that was the main reason why I wanted to explore him. And I have found that readers, just like you said, some people just do not like him. And some people are like, oh, I love this character. And then there are people who are like, I started off hating this person, and then by the end I was like, okay, he's fine. So
I have strong hate, but I can respect the fact that he wanted to be, in the trenches and fighting for his people and with his people. I can respect that, but he just kind of
right. Yeah.
got on my nerves.
Listen, if you can continue the series, I have plans for him. There is more. Hopefully you grow to love him.
Okay.
But I think you may also grow to hate him. So
see? Polarizing.
So there are some things that are going to happen, and you're not going to agree with every decision he makes.
I don't agree with every decision that everybody makes in this book. That's why I said it's a thought experiment, because, I just can't. And I'm the kind of person that I'm just like, nope, I'm done with you. Goodbye. I can cut people off in a heartbeat. But I couldn't cut anybody off in this book, even though I everybody in this book worked my nerves in one way or another, but I couldn't cut them off because you really wrote it in such a way that I don't agree with the things that they're doing, but I understand it. And that makes it so hard to pick a side. You really show that there's side A and side B and the truth. You know, they always say there's three sides every story. Your side, my side, and the truth. And that I feel like this book is the perfect example of that. There's your side, there's my side, and the truth.
Right.
Yeah. So people who read your book might compare it to someone like Brandon Sanderson. Has he or any other author influenced your writing? And what new elements do you feel that you're bringing to the epic fantasy genre with the Seventh Cadence?
I would say, yeah. Brandon Sanderson, one of his big influences was Robert Jordan. He's a big influence for me as well. Okay. I was greatly influenced by, the stories of Ursula K. Le Guin and Frank Herbert, Octavia E. Butler,
Octavia, yeah.
Octavia. Ooh, my tongue got me tongue-tied for a second.
That's all right. That's all right.
But, there are a lot of influences that kind of everywhere. There's so many influences, but those are some of the primary ones. And for me, what I kind of wanted to bring to the table was more of, trying to take history and science and take those things from the what I learned, from high school and college, and try to weave them into the story in interesting ways, and also take themes from different angles and say, well, this is the theme of the story. What if I play it out in 3, 4, 5 different ways, and let the reader kind of come to their own conclusions about it and the nuances of reality. As far as, Brandon Sanderson, he's possibly one of the most popular fantasy writers of the world right now. He has massive worlds that are often interconnected, but his big thing is magic systems. Instead, I thought, well, I don't want to be the magic system guy, but maybe I can focus more on theme. Maybe I can focus more on taking, magical creatures and turning them on their head and doing a different spin on them. Maybe I can focus more on historical conflicts and allow people to draw parallels between them very easily. And I've gotten emails from readers who are like, oh, this reminds me of, what happened in the 80s with the U.S. and whatnot. And it's like, well, I'm really glad you saw that. I didn't specifically base it off of any one thing, but I kind of blended a bunch of different things. But I kind of wanted you to be able to see what you wanted to see in it, so that you as the reader can connect to it and come to it with whatever information that you already have and be able to relate to it. So
Okay. So this goes back to our point that you talked about Gabriel having a story. So the Seventh Cadence is a very compelling introduction to the Continua Chronicles. So without revealing too much, can you hint at some of the adventures we're going to experience in the next installment, and how many installments are there going to be in the series? And does Gabriel get his own book in the series?
So here's the thing. These are the things I can hint at. Right now, I'm planning to have 5 chunkers in the story. If it expands beyond that, I'm sorry. It's hard to get all these storylines.
We don't know what characters are going to jump on the page that you weren't expecting.
Right, exactly. I think I have over 100 named characters in that book. In the Seventh Cadence. Not all of them are important, but the fact that I named 100 people because I was building my own wiki, I'm like, oh my goodness, what have I done? You know? But so I would say because of that, if you look at the map, there are places we haven't explored yet. And I plan on exploring as many of them as I can.
Okay.
You know, what's going on at the Kryn Isles? Like, who knows? I haven't talked about them that much. I mean, we know that, you know, maybe, you know, there's pirates there maybe or something. What's going on there? You know, what's really going on in Armith? What's really going on in Gaia? We only had glimpses of who those countries are near the beginning, just before, you know, the second part of the book came in. So I want to explore them. In the second book, I do expand it a little bit to explore different facets of, or different places that I didn't spend as much time in or haven't spent time in at all. And so I don't want to directly spoil anything, but
I don't directly spoil it, but just
this won't be a heavy spoiler. Let's just say I don't expand extremely broadly.
Okay.
But instead I kind of spend more time, because in the Seventh Cadence, they move around to a lot of different places.
Right.
In the book. And instead of having to jump around so quickly, I allow the characters, for the most part, to stay in one spot and really dig deep there. And then in following books, I'm going to allow them to expand a little bit more. So, I mean, just from the ending of the first book, we have characters ending up in certain places, and those places that they end up are the places I'm going to explore a little deeper.
Okay.
And as hinted at the end of the Seventh Cadence, we get a return of Queen Frey, which allows me to explore Armith a little bit without actually being there. You know, you get to see a little bit more of her and the Armith-Zora relations, the two countries, and how they're related, and, you know, what future they have together.
Okay.
And one very special thing that I'm doing in book 2 is I have adapted a story from my mother's childhood into that book.
Oh, wow.
And I'm worried because...
Did you get Mama's permission? That's the first thing.
I did get her permission, and I'm even more excited to do it because I filed off the serial numbers. You would not know it was my mother, but it's incredibly dark. And
well, now we know it's your mama because you didn't told us in the show.
I'm actually fine. I'm actually fine with that.
So why are you worried then?
Okay, because of what happens in the story, the darkness of it. I'm trying to figure out. I'm like talking to some of my writer friends. I'm like, this is going to divide my audience because some people are going to hate this so much that they're going to be, I can't read. I have to stop right here. I cannot read anymore. And then other people like me who are like, I get like that kind of thing. It's like, well, it doesn't bother me that much. But I'm not trying to write grim, dark stories, but something happens in a story that that people have very clear boundaries on.
Okay.
And I'm like, I don't want to do this, but it's kind of what happens in real life. And because of what exactly happens, it makes the story far more poignant. And anyway, it's a story that deals with racism in a very interesting way.
Okay.
And we kind of had hints to me doing a story like that with Amy and her journey with the people there that come from Desera in the Bamali Plain. And I kind of want to explore that a little bit. And
Okay, now my interest is really piqued.
Right. So that one is very interesting to me because I'm taking a story from, my mother grew up in the Deep South, and she was born in 1948. And there are some things that happened to her and her family that, she's told me, and my family has told me, that are like, wow, that's dark. So I took that story, the primary story, I took that, and then I also took things that she's told me about her childhood to meld it into a story that's a little more fleshed out.
Okay, so when is this book coming out? Because now I got to read it.
I don't know when it's coming out.
You don't know?
I'm a slow writer. That's my big flaw, is I'm a very slow and meticulous writer.
Okay.
I'm the kind of person who, when I revise the book, it's usually not for the prose. Like, I try to get it right at the beginning. And now that I've, written a few other books, like, my expectations for myself have gone up. So I'm writing these sentences and I'm like, I can do better than that. Just because I know that I've already...
So you're one of those people that edit along the way instead of just writing the book and then going back and doing the edits.
Exactly. So what I've had to learn is that because I'm that way, for good or worse, for better or for worse, so because I'm that way, I have to really know what's going to happen in this story. So I've meticulously planned the book, at least. So now, every time I write a scene, it's just me, like, writing and editing the scene at the same time. But I don't have to worry about the overall trajectory of the story because I already know what's going to happen. And even if I forget, like, my outlines are insane. So my outline for book 2 is about 25,000 words. It's a novella by itself, just the outline, because I've detailed it that much of what I want to happen. So I know exactly what I need to write. It's me. It's more about me being picky, and also, oh man, I forgot how I described this. Let me go read my previous book. What is that? Oh man, you know what?
Right.
So that never happens to me again. Let me document this. Like all these like little tasks that have nothing to do with the writing, of the prose themselves, of me being like, let me go do that. Right. So that's been kind of an experience, because writing a sequel, and this kind of sequel, with a world and so many different details, has been a completely different challenge. It's because the first book was a bigger challenge because I had to do the world building and write the book. And I thought, well, it'll be easier this time because I don't have to do any of the world. It's already built. Like, now I just have to write the
world is built.
story.
Now we can take off.
Right. But then it became, well, hold on.
Lord.
I built a lot of world, and I made a lot of things, known about the world. Now I have to make sure not to contradict myself. So I have to make sure, like, oh, is that what happened? Was the room on the left side or the right side in the first book? Let me go find that. Where was that in the book? And
you're just gonna have to write things in and be like, all right, plot twist.
Right, exactly. Oh, the room moved. Yeah, somebody constructed something on, whatever. So, but, actually, the funny thing, so there's a lot of issues right now about artificial intelligence and generative AI, and I don't know if you've talked about that on your podcast or had any guests who talked about that yet, but I don't need AI to write awful prose for me. I can do that all by myself. I can write by myself. Right. But what I would really like AI to do is for me to be able to ask it, like, how did I describe this room in the story? Can you verify where this character is in this story so I don't contradict myself? Like, what happened? Like, that kind of stuff. Right. Or at least have I wish I had a personal assistant who could do that, but that would be the best use of that kind of technology instead of getting it to write a story for you. I don't need that.
Well, I don't know what the limits are, because I use ChatGPT to help me find titles for episodes and things like that. But I don't know how much of I don't know what the limit is on copying and pasting, but in theory, you could copy and paste your whole book into the prompt bar and hit enter, and then it's up in there, and then you could say, okay, where in the story is this? You know, and you could ask it that, but I don't know if it has a limit on how much you can actually copy and paste and like put up into the
right. So into
the chat thing.
I love technology, and artificial intelligence is one of those things that me and a lot of my writer friends, some of them, not all of them, but a lot of them are like, you know, it doesn't really matter. Like, it's like, we're going to do this anyway, so I'm not that worried about it. But some of the so I've played around with them because I'm just curious. Like, I kind of want to know what this is, and maybe there is actually some utility. It's probably not what we're all afraid of, and it's probably something just different that, okay, maybe this tool is useful for writers or whoever else needs to use it. Like, what are the things that it could be used for besides doing the things that you want to do? Like, there's no point in being a writer if you don't actually want to write the book. Right. So, I mean, that just takes all the fun out. Right. So I honestly don't think that's going to be a significant threat. So the way I have played with different tools. So I know that there's some tools that, you can copy significant stuff. ChatGPT, you can't put a whole lot in at once. But I have played around with it just to see. And the funniest thing, and I'm sure it'll get smarter in a frightening way, but it cannot, with something like a story or something like the stories that I'm telling, it cannot keep things straight. Like, I'll put like the outline, and it's very clear to a human what the story means or what it is. And then it'll think, oh yeah, Telly, who's a seer, is like, it's like, no, that's not, that's the wrong character.
Yeah, I believe they call it AI hallucinations. Right. Is what they call it. Yeah.
Right. So if you give it too many variables, it can't juggle all the balls the same way that a person can. So,
right. I see it as a tool. You know, it's a great tool for, like, when I need to write a blog post because I want to keep my blog current and I have no idea what to write. I'll put in a prompt and, you know, and ask it to give me ideas off that prompt. But, you know, it's not AI that's going to take over things. It's the people that learn how to use it as the tool that it is. Because it's a great, if you can really hone in on your prompt, you can really have it give you a nice foundation of ideas that you can then take and develop on your own. So I don't have a problem with it if you use it in the right way as a tool to help you do things.
Right. Yeah. I'm to make this meta, I was listening to a podcast.
Okay.
That's my catchphrase. That's my wife says that's my catchphrase. I was listening to this podcast, and they were talking about the economics of AI, and one person said that, you know, AI is the B- student at everything, and that if there's something you're really good at, you're not going to really want AI to do it for you because it's not going to be as good as you. But if there's something you're super weak at, you know, AI could probably help you get to a certain level.
Exactly.
So that you can, you know, so if it's idea generation, if it's, you know, coming up with titles, you know, variants of titles, because that can actually be pretty challenging to do.
I hate
different titles and sort through different titles, you know, descriptions, you know, so I've learned that I can actually use it for my descriptions for my YouTube videos because I'm like, well, I wrote the script.
That's what I do.
I'll feed it its script, and then I'll say, okay, can you come up with a description for this? And keywords, too, while you're at it, you know?
Right.
And
SEO tags, SEO description. Yeah, I use it for that. Yeah.
You know, that's completely non-essential for me as for the content that I do, but it's just stuff like busy work that I'm like, well, I don't have an assistant to do this. So it's very useful, you know.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
But
so
anyway, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, like, I'm so sorry that I took this on a very weird tangent. So
that's okay.
You can cut this out of the podcast if you
want. I mean, it's kind of par for the course. We're talking about fantasy. We're talking about building worlds. It's only natural that would be an extension of it. Absolutely. So you dealt a lot with honor and ethics in this book. What themes are you going to be dealing with in the next book? I know you talked about racism, but are there any other themes that we're going to see in the next book?
To me, a lot of it has to do with power and the responsibility of having power. You know, the responsible use of power. You know, the story that deals with racism is part of that. You know, it takes one viewpoint on it. And each of the characters have to come to terms with certain things. So, you know, without spoiling the ending of the Seventh Cadence, you know, certain characters, basically they have to really start rebuilding their world. Yeah. And that means, okay, so how do we do this in a way? Obviously, the old world order had certain flaws. Do we rebuild it the exact same way? How do we change it, and what do we change? And the fact that we have the power to do those things, like, is that good or bad? And how do we do this responsibly? I kind of want to look at those things, and see where it takes me. So,
all right. So we have an interesting journey. How many books do you think are going to be in the series?
I think 5, not including any spin-off things.
I think you said that, but I'm asking.
The core series. The core series, 5 books. You know, I have the novella that I spun off to tell Amy and Mara's story that's kind of in between the Seventh Cadence and the next book.
I feel like there's going to be some more novellas in between all the
right. I also have kind of planned another trilogy that happens somewhere else in the world. So I'm like, there's no way I'm going to be able to fit this storyline in. I still want to do it, but it happens in parallel.
The world just keeps growing and growing. It's like Star Wars. There's just so many different worlds that you can spin off of this thing.
Right, and I even have one story that's just completely out of left field that I have planned, where I'm like, oh, you know what? I kind of want to write a fantasy romance in this world that, and I have it planned out, and I know how it all fits in and everything, but it's totally non-essential. But if you just wanted to read it, you could, you know. Okay. But yeah, that's
a lot going on.
It's a lot, and I'm too slow. So if anybody who's listening to this wants to be my personal assistant that can say, oh, this is how you describe that. Now keep writing. You know, contact me. I'll put
That's
you
what you have AI for. AI can tell you how to describe it.
Oh man, I wish it was that good that I could say, pull this out. I'm sure it will get there, but it's not quite that good.
Right now, you just have to know how to write the prompts to get it to do it. Prompt generation is the key. That's the key. Right. That's the key. So where can readers find your book?
So you can go to my website, jimwilbourne.com, JimWilbourne.com. Lucky enough to have a name that I can break into 3s like that. Makes it easy to spell. And you can find everything that I'm doing there. From there, if you want to support me more directly and you don't like Amazon, you can just buy the book directly from me. I don't have the ebook available that way, obviously, because of Kindle Unlimited and exclusivity, and Amazon takes over the world. But you can buy the paperback from me signed. I'll sign it and send it to you, and I packaged it up real nicely and send you a nice personal note. And
so I might have to do that because I have the Kindle version, but I need I need a physical copy.
Yeah, I'll just send you. Okay. Don't worry about it. Just get with me later. We'll make it happen.
All right.
But and then outside of that, you know, I have like merch available, and I have an email list. If you're not quite sure you want to, you know, dive into this 600 page chunker, you can join my email list. I'll send you a story for free. You know, you can get a little bit of feel of my writing, and then, you know, you can decide from there.
All right.
And also, I have a YouTube channel. So, and
jumping into that, where can we find you on the internet and social media in addition to your website?
Yeah, so YouTube, I'm just Jim Wilbourne on that. I'm Jim Wilbourne everywhere. And if it's not
Okay.
Jim Wilbourne, it's Jim Wilbourne author.
Okay.
Basically,
Great.
yes.
Consistency.
Very easy. If you search Jim Wilbourne, you should be able to find me in all the places that I have things.
Okay.
So my YouTube channel is the newest venture that I'm doing because not only writing fiction isn't the only passion. I've been wanting to write these essays on fantasy and storytelling and fantasy in ways that readers can connect to them, not just authors. And
Okay.
I've been doing that there. So I have a lot of, little video essays about the history of fantasy and like how fantasy interacts with other aspects of storytelling. And I'm just taking a look at fantasy in a lot of different directions. And
Okay.
yeah, and I'm having a lot of fun with that. So you should
Okay.
check that out. I try to put out as many videos as I can. I cannot promise it's going to come out weekly or bi-weekly or anything. I have a lot of
Right.
balls in the air, but it's there if you want to explore a little bit more. So
Okay. Okay. And for people that are listening, you should come and watch us on YouTube because Jim's background is so cool and his shirt matches his background.
well,
He's
see,
got is the wall blue or is it just the lights that are blue back there?
It's lighting.
Wow.
I have blue lights behind the books.
Nice.
So yeah, this is actually my background for my YouTube videos. So
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. So like I said, if you're listening, you got to go to the YouTube channel and watch because it's like a whole, it makes me I need a different background.
I did it for you. I just wanted you to be pleasantly surprised by my background.
I am. It worked. Thank you so much. Well, we have come to the end of our show. Thank you so much for being here, sharing your time and talents with me today. I truly appreciate having you on. Enjoyed the book.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Well, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And y'all know how I do. At the end of every show, I leave you with a quote. And today's quote comes from Hugo and Nebula award-winning science fiction and fantasy writer N.K. Jemisin.
Yes.
And she says, "So here is why I write what I do. We all have futures. We all have pasts. We all have stories. And we all, every single one of us, no matter who we are and no matter what's been taken from us or what poison we've internalized or how hard we've had to work to expel it, we all get to dream." Until next time, y'all, you know what to do. Grab a book and read, and I'm out. Thank you for lending me your ear today. If you've enjoyed this independent podcast, you can help me continue to shine the light on Black authors and their stories by becoming a patron at patreon.com/betweenthereads or by giving a one-time gift at www.ko-fi.com/betweenthereadspodcast. That's ko-fi.com/betweenthereadspodcast. Tune in next time for another great episode.